The cannon waited in the fog, its black mouth aimed at a quiet harbor where the only sound was water lapping against wood. Most of America slept, unaware that before sunrise, the country would begin killing itself when the first shell soared toward Fort Sumter in April of 1861. It shattered more than stone walls. It shattered the illusion that compromise could hold the United States together forever. This wasn't just the start of a war. It was the violent, bloody end of a long and bitter argument. The American Civil War wasn't born in that moment of gunfire. It was born in ink, in whispered promises, and in uncomfortable silences that stretched back for decades. From the very moment the nation declared that all men were created equal, it carried a contradiction heavy enough to break it apart. The contradiction was slavery. It was a problem that was never solved, only postponed. Each generation passed the burden forward, hoping someone else would eventually have to deal with it. But time was running out. As the country expanded westward, every new territory, every new state, reopened the same old wound. Would it allow slavery or forbid it? Every answer pleased one side and enraged the other. Lawmakers tried to stitch the nation together with paper and glue. We had the Missouri Compromise, a line drawn across the map to separate free and slave territories. Then came the Compromise of 1850, another desperate attempt to balance the scales. Then the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which let settlers decide for themselves, effectively lighting a fuse. Each one was presented as a permanent solution, but each one only delayed the inevitable, making the final explosion even bigger. By the 1850s, America was no longer arguing quietly. It was shouting. In the territory of Kansas, pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers turned the fertile plains into a killing ground, a grim preview of the war to come. This was bleeding Kansas, and the violence wasn't just on the frontier. It spilled into the halls of power in Washington. Lawmakers traded threats instead of words. In a shocking moment, Senator Charles Sumter was nearly beaten to death with a cane on the Senate floor for condemning slavery. The attack was brutal, and it made one thing crystal clear. The nation's disagreements were no longer theoretical. They were personal, they were violent, and they were irreconcilable. The North and the South were becoming like two different countries, strangers living under the same roof. The North was industrializing at a rapid pace. Its cities swelled with factories, its landscape crisscrossed by railroads, and its population diversified by waves of immigrants seeking a new life. Its economy was dynamic, built on free labor and manufacturing. The South, on the other hand, remained overwhelmingly rural. Its wealth was tied to the land, but its entire economic and social structure was built on the backs of millions of enslaved people. Cotton was king, and slavery was the throne it sat upon. To question slavery, in the eyes of the South, was not just a moral debate, it was an existential threat to their entire way of life. Then came Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's election in 1860 was the spark that ignited the powder keg. He was a moderate, a man who didn't call for the immediate abolition of slavery where it already existed, but he was firm in his belief that slavery should not be allowed to expand into the new Western territories. For many Southerners, that position alone was unforgivable. It signaled a future where their political power would dwindle, where their way of life would be choked off. When Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state, it felt like a declaration of political war. It felt like extinction. The response was swift and decisive. One by one, Southern states began to leave the Union. They didn't see it as rebellion. In their minds, they were exercising their right to escape a government that no longer represented their interests. They were forming their own nation. The Confederate States of America was born, with its own president, its own constitution, and its own army. The Union, under President Lincoln, now faced an impossible choice. Let the states leave and watch the great American experiment crumble into pieces, or fight to preserve it, to hold the nation together by force. Lincoln chose to fight. He believed the Union was perpetual, unbreakable. But it would take a war to prove it, and so we return to that foggy harbor in Charleston, when Confederate guns finally opened fire on the Federal troops at Fort Sumter. The decision was made. There were no deaths in that initial 34-hour bombardment, but the sound of those cannons echoed across the continent, a deafening roar that signaled the end of peace. Men, North and South, rushed to enlist. Bands played patriotic tunes in town squares. Flags waved from every window. Many people, on both sides, believed the war would be short, a glorious adventure over by Christmas. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. They couldn't imagine the 4 years of bloodshed, the hundreds of thousands of lives that would be lost, and the deep, painful scars that would be left on the soul of the nation. The talking was over. The war had begun. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, Part 2 of the American Civil War story will be coming soon. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. See you next time.